Oh, it's from Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, sure, cool. Shakespeare, whatever, fine. I prefer West Side Story, which Shakespeare completely ripped off. Just a complete rip-off. What's good? Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Newest Olympian. My name is Mike Schubert. I'm the titular Newest Olympian. I'm a 32-year-old man who never read the Percy Jackson books as a kid. I read them as an adult because I was on a quest to determine if it was a book series that society had been sleeping on, and I said yes, and now I'm seeing if that's the same situation for the Heroes of Olympus books, and I am joined on this quest by a very special guest because I'm never on this journey alone. I am joined today by someone whose memes you may have seen across the internet, and also you may have seen other coverage by our lovely guest. It's Robert from the Damn Meme Page. Robert, how's it going?
How's it going, everyone? Life continues. That is the one constant until I guess it's no longer constant.
Correct. Death, taxes, life. Percy Jackson coverage. The constants that we can all depend on and rely on.
Exactly.
From day in and day out. So what questions for guesting have I asked you? You've been on just once, yeah?
Just the once.
Okay, so I asked you what your cabin is, but I've not asked you the second question, which I believe is the nectar and ambrosia question. Ideal food, ideal drink. What are they going to taste like?
Oh my gosh. Let's see. So my ideal nectar would probably be Diet Dr. Pepper. It is
already love
literally my nectar in real life.
Love it for you. I don't drink hot soda. I don't want.
we are two different, Mike. I drink at least a couple of diet sodas a day. It's an addiction at this point. I'm trying to drink more water because water is healthier, but
it's good.
Yeah,
water's good. It's that good stuff. Reduces mouth clicks and podcasting. It's good.
Oh, you're telling me. And the ambrosia would probably be, it's going to be weird because like my favorite food is chicken teriyaki, but I can't imagine putting like a brownie shaped thing in my mouth and tasting chicken teriyaki. That'll feel weird.
Look, I don't know, man. Go for it. Percy's drink tastes like cookies, so anything's fair game.
You know what? Fair enough.
All right, chicken teriyaki. I like it. Fun. Fantastic. Well, we're going to be covering chapters 27 and 28 of The Son of Neptune, which you called dibs on many, many moons ago, and I can see why, because the ending of chapter 28 absolutely slaps.
Oh, yeah.
So I think we should just get right into it.
Yep.
So where we last left our heroes at the end of chapter 26, we have the situation where they've talked with Phineas and they're seeming like they're going to go and do his bidding and get the red harpy, but it very much seems like, well, yeah, we're going to do this, but we're also not really going to do this. So they're going to get the red harpy, but handing the red harpy over to Phineas does not seem like that's in the calculus, but we'll have to see. So chapter 27 begins with Percy saying, quote, "We'll need some of your food." And Percy grabs the food. At first, I didn't recognize that he was asking for the food as part of the plan. I thought he was just so hungry that he was like, all right, but let us eat something. Because in the previous chapter, there was so much discussion by narrator Percy of him being like, man, I was so hungry. Everything smelled good.
He's a growing teenage boy. You and I were both growing teenage boys at one point. We eat a lot.
Look, even to this day, I might still be a growing teenage boy. I still eat so much. Like, I finish breakfast and I'm like, cool, alrighty. The time it takes me to like clean up after breakfast, by the time I'm done cleaning off plates and pans from making eggs and potatoes and stuff, I'm like, okay, so now what am I going to eat? I am blessed with the curse of a very active metabolism. I roll with it, but I do eat a lot, so much so that like coworkers, when I had coworkers, thought I was a ridiculous person with how much I was eating during the office. But I also get way hungrier when I'm bored. So
that's truly one of the things. Am I bored or am I hungry?
Mm-hmm. And you know what? To bring it all back, sometimes you might be thirsty. So that's another reason why you drink water. Sometimes when you think you're hungry, you're actually just dehydrated and you actually want water. So water's good. Everyone drink water. I would love if this episode was brought to you by water. If some water company wants to sponsor me, please. I drink so much water. So much. I will gladly drink whatever bottle of water you make. Unless it's Aquafina, because that stuff tastes awful. Or is it Dasani? Which one's the bad one?
I think it's Dasani that's considered the bad one.
They're the bad one? Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, I just don't drink a lot of like plastic bottle water. We live in New York. Sink water's fantastic.
We live in, well, you live in New York.
Yeah, you're Jersey. But Jersey also, growing up in Jersey, the tap water is great also. So I didn't realize that wasn't the case everywhere until I moved to Texas and started high school, and the tap water is disgusting. It was disgusting.
Even with good, clean drinking water, I love me a good Brita filter.
Yeah, look, you got to get something in there. And if you're reducing plastic, cool. That being said, if a water company that doesn't, like, who's it, Liquid Death, they do the canned water? Sure. Yeah. Come on, some water company, get on the case. Or a water bottle company. Anyway, enough promotion. Let's get into the commotion of Percy Jackson. So he grabs this food and then he takes the team across the street and tries to calm down. He's very upset by Phineas and the way he's treating this harpy and all this stuff that's burbling up inside of him. Hazel takes a different approach. She smacks a bus stop bench and says, "That man, he needs to die again." And again is in italics, so you know she meant it.
One of my favorite things about the series, and like you've known Nico enough and you're meeting Hazel enough, so the general consensus of like headcanoning the two kids of Hades is that Hazel's like the sweet innocent being and Nico's the aggressive, like murderous, hateful dark prince or whatever. Meanwhile, Nico just wants to eat his McDonald's Happy Meal and play Mythomagic. Hazel's like, "That man needs to die. I will kill him myself if I have to."
Yeah, Hazel shows that you wrong her, she's going to want to wrong you, or at least make things right by murdering you. Like, she seems like the rage can be within her. So I don't want to mess with her at all. I don't want to be on the other side of Hazel's ire. I mean, we also saw in the beginning of this book how adept she is in combat. So yeah, I don't think characterizing her as this dainty little good girl is correct. If that's the case, I obviously don't have like a fan read on the situation. The only weird thing, and obviously no spoilers, but in some of the subreddit discussions for the TNO subreddit, when Hazel was first introduced, some of the comments were like, "Oh, I'm glad Mike likes Hazel. It's refreshing to find someone who likes her." I'm like, what? Like, how is not liking Hazel a take? But obviously, I don't know the full catalog of Hazel.
Even me knowing the full thing about Hazel, I'm like, really? People don't like Hazel?
I don't know. She seems very likable. So I'll have to see how it continues. But right now, super duper pro Hazel. And, you know, smacking a bus stop bench, as long as you're not breaking it, like, hell yeah, Hazel. So she's upset. Also, the book narrator Percy notes a couple of things about her, which I need to continue to remember. She's got long curly hair and golden eyes. I forgot about the golden eyes, which at first I was like, oh, cool. And then immediately after I was like, Kronos. But no, it should be fine. Percy then remembers how confident she was when taking control of the Gorgon situation that I just referenced. So he wants to return the favor and help her out. He's just not really sure how. He wants to take charge here, but he just doesn't know what to do. And narrator Percy reveals that he was not surprised by Hazel being resurrected from the underworld, given how she avoided talking about her past, and Nico being guarded about her. But all of this being said or known, it doesn't change how Percy feels about her. He thinks she's a good kid with a good heart, and she feels like a bright, lively personality. So he's all on board. And I love that he's like, yeah, she's got this weird backstory, but who amongst us doesn't? So he's chill.
Yeah. I'm sorry. You said Percy Jackson and good kid in the same sentence, and now my brain is just...
Of course. Yeah, that was that. I'm glad you called that out. Otherwise, someone on the social media of sorts or the subreddit or the Discord would have been like, oh, what a great pun Mike made. It's like, no, that was not intentional. I deserve no credit unless my subconscious gets credit. Percy thinks that Hazel deserves a future. So he says to Hazel, we'll get him. He's nothing, with nothing in italics, like you, Hazel. I don't care what he says. And honestly, there was a long enough gap between me reading chapter 26 and 27 and that I was like, what did he say? I don't remember. I remember him saying like, oh yeah, she'll know kind of stuff, but I don't remember him necessarily comparing himself to her. Does that ring any bells?
I have a vague memory of him, like sort of saying something akin to like, we're both the same, Hazel, something akin to that. Very much referencing we are both souls who were once dead, now brought back.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that was the comparison. So Percy, very apt to say they are not alike at all. But Hazel disagrees, saying that Percy doesn't know the full story and that she should be in the fields of punishment because she is just as bad as him. And I don't think that's true. I think that's her being too hard on herself. Frank is on a similar wavelength. He protests defiantly and then yells, "She's a good person!" across the street. Hazel reaches her hand out to Frank and begins to say, I don't, but Frank is just all consumed by his thoughts. He grabs his spear and he offers to try and scare the information out of Phineas Phineas via intimidation, and Percy puts him down easy, basically saying like, yeah, that could be a good backup plan, but I'm not sure that it would actually work. And also you only have 2 more uses of that spear, so maybe we should just hold on to it. We love a limited use item. Just allows for the intrigue. When should you actually use it? Or is it like me playing an RPG? You never use it until you beat the game, and then you're like, oh man,
no, you
I
can't
should have
use
used
it.
it.
I was going to say, this was reminding me of a scene in Phineas and Ferb. I forget the exact context, but Phineas is getting like talked down to by an older person, and Ferb wants to attack them with a mace, and Phineas is like, not yet, Ferb.
Not yet. That's great.
That's just sort of the same vibe going on right now. Not yet, Frank.
Yes, not yet. A very funny response here. But speaking of Phineas, Percy was confused about what Phineas said about Frank's family, his great-grandpa destroying camp, and his Argonaut ancestor, and whatever this stick is. So I like that Percy, in just a couple of sentences, is like, oh yeah, I could totally understand what Hazel's whole deal was. And then with Frank, he's like, what the heck's going on with this guy? So Percy decides that he's not going to press Frank on it because he doesn't want to bring Frank to tears, especially in front of Hazel. And Percy's social skills are off the charts. He is such a good friend. He is such a good bro/wingman type. Like, he knows that there's something going on between the two. I think that was a factor in him leaving to get stuff out of the boat. It was a little bit of like, let's see if they can have a little moment to that. And then now he has such a good read on social situations. It's so fantastic. I really appreciate this about Percy.
Absolutely. I think Percy is so adept at just becoming friends with anyone he deems as a good person. He met these two like 2-3 days ago, whatever it was at this point in the timeline, and he's just cluing in very quickly. Okay, something weird about you. Something weird about you. I'm just not going to say anything. We have a quest to do. Let's all have a good time.
Right. And I always try to avoid main character syndrome with this, but I do see a lot of similarities between Percy and myself. And I think this is one of them. There are certain times when I meet someone, it's just like, oh, okay, I've had one conversation with you, but we understand each other's deal and we can be very close. And I feel like I talked about this on a past episode at one point, but like, I can be intense with the friendship. Like, I'm ready. It's like the friend version of when you know, like what people say about a relationship. Like, one of my closest friends in the universe is Johnny Frolickstein. And this is the same for Stephen as well, Dr. Stephen Parra. Both of them, it was like once we met in college, it was very quick to be like, oh, the vibes are very correct here. And I could just like see that I was going to get along with them. And then similarly, I also have a good vibe when I'm not going to get along with someone or when I don't like someone's vibe. And I'm not going to try to put anyone on blast, but there's a famous podcaster that I'll just make up some fake name that like no person would have. Like, let's say his name was like Dax Shepard or something. Like, no human would have that name. And I just knew from a long time that I don't know. I just feel like I wouldn't like that guy's vibe. And then there was a podcast I was listening to that he was a guest on, and he was atrocious. Just like so uninteresting and such a slog to listen to, and just insufferable. I felt like vindicated, but then I was also like, God damn, this is an 1.5 hour long episode, and he's the guest.
Yeah.
But I want to hear what they're talking about.
No, I get that. I have that with certain unnamed popular TikTokers. I'm just going to leave it at that.
Oh, you're actually not going to name a person. Okay.
Wait. Oh, I didn't know you named the person.
Oh, I said Dax Shepard, but did you think that was actually a fake name? That is a real human on Earth's name.
I did not know
Dax.
That was a real person.
Yeah, he's like, he has I don't want to make this an anti thing, but like he was like an actor. He's like Kristen Bell's husband or whatever.
Here, I'm not going to name names, but anyone who wants the tea, he is heavily involved in a lot of like movie review stuff. He was someone who got to interview a bunch of the casts for Percy Jackson. And I'm like, I hate that you got.
Oh, I know. Yeah, I know. I don't like that guy. I've seen 0 TikToks from this person, but I saw like one clip with the Percy stuff, and I was like, this guy? Really? And not any of the other Percy Jackson content creators and / or Liam Crowley? What are we doing?
Yeah. Hey, if you know who we're talking about, you know. We're not going to say the name. But anyways, Percy Jackson.
Right, but real quick, his legal name is Dax. What? I really thought it was going to be like Eugene Shepard. No, Dax, his first name. So like, I guess I can't. That makes it better because he didn't like choose to go by it. Like, he
Dax
was
Shepard?
given this name. His name is Dax Shepard. I don't want to make this all about him. But that's his first name.
Who the heck is this? Anyway.
DAX, his actual name. I mean, I got to take it up with his parents then. Because what are you doing? What are you doing? Oh, I guess like Daxter?
Oh.
Like, that's a name?
Yeah, it's a name, but also it's a terrible name. Shout out to all the Daxters who listen to this podcast. You're a great person, I'm sure.
Look, I enjoyed the video game Jak and Daxter, but that's the only Daxter I've ever known. there's Dexter. That's the murder guy show with the Bad Last Season that they've rebooted to try to make everyone forget about the Bad Last Season, right?
And also the boy genius with a laboratory under his parents' house.
Ah, Dexter's Laboratory, but of course. Okay. And now, anyway, Percy Jackson. So Percy has an idea. Let's try and talk to the Red Harpy using the food as a bit of a peace offering. So they open the food and they walk down and they hear other harpies perching nearby, and Percy wonders what the nearby mortals must be seeing through the mist. And this continually is something I want to see. I would love it if later down the road, Uncle Rick makes a companion book that is just every single what the people saw through the mist in every single situation where that was brought up. And if he doesn't do it, I'm going to make this for future live show material. I think that could be very fun. I might have already written this down. Let's see. Do I already have that? Yep. Top of my notes for live show ideas. What does the mist do? So yeah, I can do that if Rick doesn't. But Rick, it's a silver platter right there. Come on. That'd be so fun. Like a cute little companion book. Come on.
Yeah.
It'd be adorable.
I think the answer to that would be fanfic. And I'm not aware if there's a Percy Jackson fanfic that exists with this exact premise. I am unfortunately aware of a Harry Potter fanfic that has this premise where it's just the Harry Potter books through some random Hufflepuff's eyes.
Okay, but Puffs is a very good play.
You know, Puffs is a very good play.
It's a very
I wasn't
good
talking
play.
about Puffs, but
Sure. But I feel like an illustrated companion book where you draw out like what they're seeing, like you could have a side-by-side thing where like one side has what's actually going down and then the other side has what is being seen through the mist. Like that'd be a very fun little cute side book that they could do.
Say that louder so that Disney will actually make the merch.
Hyperion, get in my inbox. Let's do it. Anyway, Percy Jackson, that's actually happening. So Percy thinks maybe the harpies look like pigeons. And I was like, pigeons. And then he thinks maybe the weapons are lacrosse sticks. And I was like, ew, lacrosse sticks. He then wonders maybe they just think that the food is so good that it needs a personal escort. The group finds the Red Harpy in a park that reminds Percy of a park, possibly from his hometown. And he better not be thinking of Central Park, because if he is comparing any park in Portland, Oregon to Central Park, and that's no shade on Portland parks. Whatever park has the rose garden in it is beautiful and it is gorgeous, but nothing compares to Central Park. This is not even like a snooty, oh, New York is better at stuff. Like Central Park is truly an anomaly when it comes to parks. It is so huge. It is so diverse. It is so cool. It is so centrally located, as the name would suggest. There's so much to do there. It is picturesque in the summer, in the spring, in the winter, in the fall. It's just a 10 out of 10 park. Nothing compares. Nothing compares.
I just think it's some level of Rickism where he's like, I need to compare this to a park. Percy remembers a park back in New York, the Central Park, the only park I'm aware of.
I better be a different one. Like, I'll give you Union Square, I'll give you Prospect Park, but not Central, not my beloved Central. I'll give you Roosevelt Island, the most underrated park in New York. So they find a bench near a bronze elephant statue, and Hazel says that it looks like Hannibal, and Frank says that the difference is that this one is Chinese, and he explains that he can tell because his grandma has one, but then he clarifies that hers isn't 12 feet tall, it's imported from China, and then he clarifies that the reason they do this is that they're Chinese, and Hazel and Percy are fighting back laughter, and Frank says that he would just like to die from embarrassment right now, and Percy says, don't worry about it, man. Gosh, Percy's so smooth. He's so smooth. Yeah. I love it. And then he says that they should try and befriend the Harpy. Was there any sort of purpose for this Frank awkwardness other than just Frank is kind of awkward? Because it's already been established that Frank is Chinese. So it's not like this is Uncle Rick trying to do some clever way to let the reader know Frank's background. Like that was already well established. So is this just like, hey, Frank's kind of a goofball?
Expertly, as you pointed out, when he was first introduced with Raina being like Frank Zhang, that's how we know he's of Asian descent. So yeah, no, this is just a quick little Frank is a little silly, goofy guy sometimes.
But I think even like his grandma straight up is like, we are of Chinese heritage. So it's not even like anything there. I think it's just trying to show like, yes, Frank can be physically clumsy and trip over stuff, and he can also trip over his own words. So Percy then holds up the cheesy Thai noodles and offers an exchange of noodles for the chance to talk. And the Harpy swoops down and perches upon the elephant statue. She looks emaciated and says, Ella doesn't like cheese. And Percy asks if that's her name. And then she says, Ella, Ayla, and I thought she was going to keep going like Rihanna, but she says Ella, Ayla, Harpy in English, in Latin. Ella doesn't like cheese. So a weird kind of out of order, but I think what she's saying, and look, I took Latin in high school, but we did not learn the word for harpy. I think what she's saying is that Aella is the Latin word for harpy. So she goes by Ella, the traditional name that is closest to the word. That's the vibe that I got. I quick Google Latin word for
I
harpy.
beat you to the punch. The name Ella derives from ancient Greek roots and carries with it the profound meaning of whirlwind or tempest. So there's also apparently no Latin equivalent. It is a Greek word.
Yeah, Latin, just from Googling it, the internet is saying that it comes from the Latin harpia, Harpya.
Okay, there we go. That's probably what it is.
But that's interesting. I don't understand her sentence then. Ella, harpy in English and Latin.
That's just kind of Ella's thing. And we find out why she speaks like this in a little bit later down this chapter.
Yes, but she does establish she doesn't like cheese. She's also quite fidgety while she talks. She talks very quickly, and then she snatches the cinnamon burrito from our team so quickly that Percy can't even react. But then the other larger harpies start attacking her for the food, and she cries out in dismay. Percy yells for them to stop, but it is too little, too late, as the other harpies get away with the food. And Hazel asks if she's okay. Percy can see the bleeding gash on her back where Phineas hit her with the weed whacker, and Ella, who does speak with a bit of a stutter, lets our team know that she's upset at how small and weak she is. Frank is determined to get her some food that she will actually like. Percy is determined to help her in general, and he tells her that they want to be friends. And she replies, friends, 10 seasons, 1994 to 2004. And then she says a line from the original Great Prophecy, and I was like, whoa! And then after that, says that Percy is 16, and then recites lines from page 16 of Mastering the Art of French Cooking. So, wild sort of speech pattern situation going on. Lots of confusion, but also what are you doing quoting the Great Prophecy? What's going on? And it's not just me that's thinking that. Percy is freaking out, like the spidey sense is all going off with this prophecy portion. And he feels like he recognizes those words. And Hazel says it sounds like a prophecy. He wonders if it's something that Phineas had said. But when she says the name Phineas, Ella squawks and flees at the mention of his name. Hazel feels foolish for doing this, but Frank assures her it's okay, and then points to where she has flown to. She heads to her nest, which is on the roof of a library. Narrator Percy then says, quote, a library wouldn't have been Percy's first choice for someplace to visit. With his dyslexia, he had enough trouble reading signs. A whole building full of books? That sounded about as much fun as Chinese water torture or getting his teeth extracted. Quite extreme.
This was so out of pocket for Rick to write / Percy to think, but it's just so funny.
I do think it's always fun when someone makes fun of a thing they like. But yes, for the author to write a line that's like, library, what a horrible place, from potentially #1 library fan Rick Riordan. It's a pretty good bit. It's similar to, if I ever get him on the pod, I'll have to ask him, like when Percy's always dunking on Dean Martin, like Percy has a personal vendetta against Dean Martin. Does Rick really like Dean Martin or does Rick hate Dean Martin? There's no in between. So it's intriguing to me.
According to Becky, Rick just listens to a bunch of stuff. So
okay.
For no context spoilers, I asked Becky to ask her and Rick, hey, do you and Rick listen to Panic at the Disco? And she's like, no, I'm more of an oldies rock kind of person, and Rick just listens to a bunch of stuff, but I don't know exactly off the top of my head what he listens to. Okay,
so I'll say to him, dear Rick Riordan, what are your thoughts on Lil Uzi Vert? So Percy guesses that Annabeth would like this place, though. Quote, books and architecture. That was definitely her. And then Percy kind of stops in his tracks because he has this sudden realization of Annabeth taking him to a library back home but he can't recall what his hometown is. So he punches a bookshelf in frustration, and he wants to hit another one because he's so angry, but he sees the look on his friends' faces, and they look so concerned that he decides to stop. And yeah, I totally get that. I am someone who used to hit things in frustration, or if I'm playing sports, sometimes I would hit my baseball bat on the ground or like toss my hat if I was wearing tennis or whatever. I totally get that. And you know what makes you stop doing that? People looking at you. So as I've gotten older, I've gotten better at it. But like, if I'm alone, I'm more likely to kind of do this sort of thing. But if anyone else is around, like, you just look like a child. So I completely understand Percy's instincts here. Frank asks Percy if he's okay. Percy lies and says that he just got dizzy for a bit. He says that they should find a way to get to the roof. So they do find a door with roof access. The door is propped open with a copy of War and Peace. So that's a huge gap. The door is basically all of the way open. That book is super long.
They have to like step over the book as they go in.
They need one of those little like circular black plastic ridge step things that they have in libraries for you to get books off the high shelf if you're a kid. You need that to step over the book. Yeah.
It's one of those special edition like coffee table versions that's as wide as the table itself.
Somehow there's an extended edition of War and Peace. They come across Ella in a nest of books underneath a cardboard roof structure of sorts, and the team cautiously approaches. Percy apologizes for scaring her, and he also apologizes for not having a lot of food, but then he takes out Chekhov's macrobiotic beef jerky. I had wondered in a previous episode, is this beef jerky coming back? Because it came up again with the whale bringing them around and stuff. It's got to come back, and it did come back. She's very excited at the prospect of the jerky, but she tosses it aside because she cannot eat it since it is not from Phineas's table, so it violates the curse that is upon her. I was genuinely sad here because I don't know why, but I feel bad for the macrobiotic beef jerky. Sure, it doesn't sound pleasant, but that's just because macrobiotic is a funky word. Like, that shouldn't affect the taste at all.
No.
I don't know what the difference, like to me it reeks of being probiotic, but you know what tastes great? Yogurt. And that's probiotic. So like I don't see the problem with macrobiotic beef jerky just because the name of it sounds bad. I feel bad for the jerky.
I just feel like I think it's like a big joke from like the 2010s, especially the early 2010s of like, oh my gosh, you're eating this like super healthy sounding food. Let's make fun of it.
You're eating a food with a multisyllabic name. How dare you?
But RIP macrobiotic jerky, it's now just chilling on the rooftop of this library in Portland.
Well, here's the question. She tosses it aside. Does it stay on the roof or does it go overboard? Because in the city of Portland, Oregon, if a fully wrapped macrobiotic beef jerky is on the ground, that's going to be okay. Someone's going to pick that up. It's in the right town.
I have never heard such an unhinged sentence start with, in the town of Portland, Oregon.
But like, come on. If there was ever a random passerby to eat macrobiotic beef jerky, it would be in Portland, Oregon. It's the crunchiest town.
What did he mean by this?
Have you been to Portland, Oregon?
I have not.
Birkenstocks and Tevas are like the shoe of choice. Like, come on. People are eating macrobiotic beef jerky.
Oh my God.
Slacklining is like a normal thing to do. People are eating macrobiotic beef jerky. Anyway, Percy Jackson. They try to figure out a way to help her while she starts quoting various books. She explains that words calm her down. Percy then gives her a pop quiz, asking if she can recite a paragraph from a page of a random book that he picks up from her pile on the roof. And it works. She gets it perfectly verbatim. Percy gets a bad feeling about why Phineas wants her captured then. He also has a sinking feeling that the prophecy line that she recited was about him in particular. Percy says that they're going to find a way to break the curse. Ella says it's impossible. And then Percy, like the action hero that he is, says, "Nothing's impossible." Frank heals Ella's gash with nectar. Percy asks if there's any sort of way to trick Phineas, and Ella, who keeps doing this thing where she's like bouncing all over the place, her manner of speech reminds me of my brain anytime I'm doing a pun-based improv game or I'm just trying to think of a pun, because it's very word association-y where she's just kind of like train of thought of like word, this, that, and they're all kind of linked. This is exactly when I'm trying to come up with a pun, how my brain feels, just like anything of like, what's it going to be? It's got to be something good. It's got to be something good.
Quick shout out to at least my copy of the book. When she says tricks are for kids is spelled regularly instead of the brand name, which I assume Rick could not write because of copyright reasons.
I mean, that's probably a factor, but I think it's just one of those things where you go from one to the other. You know, like Percy says friends, she says friends with a capital F, you know, like I think it's just bouncing tricks are for kids. Yeah. But I also think you got one less thing to clear with the legal team. Then, I'm sure Stephanie Luer was like, this sounds like a good idea. Let's just spell it with the CK. So then Hazel asks if Phineas has any weaknesses, and Ella, straight shooter that she is, says, well, he's blind. Frank rolls his eyes, but Hazel has some patience and continues in a calm manner, asking if there are any other weaknesses that he has. And Ella says that games of chance are his downfall. She says that he can see the big picture, but not the small one. And Percy interprets this as meaning, oh, okay, he's got the gift of foresight. He can see the big, long future predictions, but he can't see the short ones. So games of chance are exciting to him because he actually doesn't know what's going to happen. So it's an appealing thing for him to explore.
Yeah. I don't know why, because when I first listened to this part, because I listened to the audiobook today to be like, okay, I need to refresh on the chapters. When I listened to this part, I was like, this is for some reason reminding me of that philosophical quandary or question or whatever. That's like, one must imagine Sisyphus as happy rolling the boulder. I'm just thinking like, one must imagine people who can see the future happy when things happen by chance.
Oh, yeah. Interesting. I mean, I think it's similar to me of when you're playing a video game and it's hard, like there's some sort of challenge, like to bring it all back to Hades, the video game. This is like the heat system in Hades 1, where after you beat the game, you can do something to make it harder, and then you can ramp it up and up and up and up. And there's a certain point at which, you know, like for me, there's a certain threshold where it's like always hard, and I feel like that's a good like minimum. And if I really want to have a challenge where I might not make it through, then yeah, I'll go higher and higher. But if you just do the same thing, there's no thrill to there not being a chance to fail, like especially when it comes to a game. So
Absolutely.
I can totally understand for someone who can only see the future to want to do something similar. And I could see this in a lot of different things. You know, you're like really, really good at spicy food, and you find a hot sauce that like actually burns your mouth, right? Like I think there's, or like me with sour candy. Like I'm a huge fan of sour candy, or just like sour things in general. Like I love green apples. Certain sour candies, I feel robbed if I have them because I'm like, this wasn't even that sour. What are we doing here? But when you find one that's like actually truly sour, now things I'm getting into is like those places that do like super dried fruits and then coat them in like some sort of sour goo, like that stuff, like truly sour. And that gets me very excited because, you know, you think you've conquered something, but then you found a new challenger, and it's good. It's really good. So the plan is set. The plan is to get Phineas to make a bet where if he loses, he has to tell them where Thanatos is. But the question remains, what to wager? Percy says that it should be something simple, something high stakes, and something that he wants, aside from Ella, of course. Ella suggests sight and then healing, but she says that Gia won't do that for him. And then Frank and Percy lock eyes instantly and in unison say, Gorgon's blood. And I didn't think about this at all, but this is such a good situation. I figured with the two identical vials, it was going to be some sort of riddle-esque situation, some sort of one brother who always tells the truth and one twin brother who always lies kind of a deal. Or if you're watching the Powerpuff Girls, when it's what's the teacher in the Him Diddle Riddle episode? I forget the name of their teacher, but they have her, like two identical versions of her.
Right. Yeah, I also forgot the name of the teacher. I was going to say Miss Bellum, and I'm like, no, that's the mayor's assistant.
Yeah. Teacher and Miss Keen.
Miss Keen. There we go.
If anyone, the best episode of the Powerpuff Girls, the original show, the best episode is Him Diddle Riddle. It's all a bunch of riddles, but one of them is there's two Miss Keens, and one always tells the truth and one always lies, and they have to do that classic thing. So I figured the vials would show up in some sort of situation like this, but I had not put the pieces together. So once they did that, I was like, oh, yo, that's so smart. Like, okay. Super cool. Super duper cool.
Chekhov, Gorgon's blood.
Yes. So much Chekhoving in this book, but you know what? It works. It rips. Hazel asks, what? Frank says, Ella's a genius, unless they die. And Percy ends the chapter by saying, don't worry about that. I've got a plan. And that is the end of chapter 27, which I have retitled War and Cheese.
Oh, damn, that's good.
Do you have a retitling?
Not for this one. I didn't really think. For the next one, I do.
Okay.
But for this one, if I have to throw something quickly, no, I have nothing. I'm sorry.
All good. I look forward to whatever you have for chapter 28, which we will get into after our mid-roll break, The Son of Fortune, where we talk about fun updates with the podcast and new merchandise. But we'll take our break now, and we'll talk about chapter 28 very soon. Hello and welcome to the Son of Fortune Shubio edition. Mostly, I'm recording this one in the Shubio. I will soon be uploading the episode from the Shubio office a day early for patrons. I'm doing this before I hit the road, and by the road, I mean the train tracks, because we've got that live show in Richmond, Virginia on Sunday. But by the time you're hearing this, it's Monday. I'm already taking the Amtrak home. Thank you to everyone who came to that show. But that's now in the past. We've got updates and stuff with the podcast, updates for everyone. So let's talk about those updates. First and foremost, as I have been saying, and as you can always know at thenewsolympian.com/about, we are taking next week off. March is a 5-Monday month. I have not taken a week off in 2025 yet, so doing so on the first week of March makes the most sense. I'm doing a thing where there will be 6 breaks throughout the year, at least planned. We'll see if the TV show wrecks that and I'm posting twice as much like I did last time, but at least the plan is to have 6 times where I take a break so that I can work on other stuff, honestly. And those will happen about every 60 days or so. So that means March 3rd, we're taking a break. I might post something to the feed. I'm not sure that I will, but regardless, we will be back on March 10th to continue our coverage of the Son of Neptune. That'll be an episode covering chapters 29 and 30. Now, speaking of the month of March, we do have one live show for the News Olympian in the month of March, and that is going to be in Houston, Texas on Sunday, March 9th. It's at a new venue. I'm excited about it. And our guest for the episode is going to be Kelly Schubert. You may have heard of her. I'm a big fan of hers. We will be covering chapters 42 through 44 of The Son of Neptune, so inching ever closer to the end of that book. And then after that, in April, I'm going to be hitting the road with my buddy Eric Hamilton Schneider, and we are going to be doing a whole big Midwest tour, and we're going to be finishing up book 2. We're going to be getting into book 3. The plan is for the beginning of book 3 to happen at the Des Moines, Iowa show, which I am planning to stream live for anyone who has access to the internet, which is you if you're listening to this. So we'll have that one be live. You can get a replay just like we've normally done. Patrons will get a 20% off discount like we did last time. So just make sure you're following the News Olympian on social media for updates about that. We're at News Olympian on Instagram. We're newsolympian.bluesky.social on Blue Sky. We're at News Olympian on Twitter. There's the subreddit, reddit.com/r/thenewsolympian. And then obviously I'll be posting on the Patreon and in the Discord with more information, giving even more updated information if you check out the director's commentaries on Patreon. Now, speaking of that Patreon, I want to give a shout out to the folks who have joined the Patreon most recently. So shout out to our newest Super God tier patron, Emily CB, and shout out to our newest Demigod tier patrons, Caitlin Hopkins and Angel the Melon. Thank you all so much for your support. May Hephaestus bless you that if you're ever taking a long Amtrak train for an event where you don't have a lot of time in the wiggle room, that he blesses your mode of transportation to not have any issues. Basically, our Amtrak train gets in like 30 minutes before we're supposed to check in with the venue and do sound check, so I'm really hoping we don't have any delays tomorrow. Also, just one note about a part of the episode that's coming after the break. There will be a part where Robert and I talk about Phineas, who is blind, writing something down on a piece of paper, and Robert wonders about his ability to write it legibly. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone knew the discussion that we have is about Phineas specifically. We're not talking about blind people as a whole, because first off, I know that blind people, it can be a range. You can be blind from birth. You can have lost your vision. You can have vision that is so bad you were deemed legally blind, but you can still see things at a certain level. So what we're talking about here is specifically Phineas, someone who wasn't blind before, lost his eyesight, and then might not know how to write as well now. I did a little bit of research, and I know that folks who are blind from birth know how to write, but they write in Braille, mimicking what they read. So I just wanted it to be super clear that what we are talking about here is Phineas specifically, and not just blind people and their ability to write. We're talking about Phineas's ability to write as his certain situation of how he came to be with his blindness. And again, I'm always willing to learn about this stuff. I love hearing from blind listeners or folks who know more about this. So you can always email thenewsolympian@gmail.com, and I love reading those. Even if I don't respond, I'm usually reading these emails. I'm just a very busy boy. If you are all caught up in the News Olympian and you are looking for some new content to consume, you are in luck, because I make a whole bunch of content, a whole lot of different things, not just podcasts. Something that I reference in this episode is a Dungeons and Dragons stream that I have done with some wonderful podcast people called 20 to Midnight, 20 midnight. I play a bard. It's super fun. We're in a race against the clock to save the world. We're at the point where like this arc's story is ending. It's getting really intense. You can watch the streams of it at twitch.tv/20to midnight, or you can go to our YouTube channel and you can watch replays of all the streams. So those are all there, and it's been a really fun time. It's my first time playing like a really long extended D&D campaign, and I've been having a blast. And the people who are involved in it, Gabrielle Urbina being our dungeon master and Emma Shercharko and Beth Ayer being the other two players with me, has been an absolute delight. So check that out, 20 to midnight, 20 midnight. Check it out on Twitch and /or YouTube. Now, unless you're listening on Patreon, where you get access to ad-free episodes, you're going to hear words from a few sponsors who make it feasible for me to be a full-time podcaster. You might hear ones by two of our new sponsors, Peak Tea and Nutrafol, but some of the other ads won't be read by me, and those are inserted locally. So if you live in San Marino, don't be surprised if you hear an ad in Italian. Once those ads are complete, we'll get back into this episode of The Newest Olympian. And we are back, and we're here to discuss chapter 28, which is also called Percy, but of course we're going to retitle it. It opens with, quote, "The old man was right where they'd left him, in the middle of the food truck parking lot." So not necessarily a banger opener, but, you know, the situation must continue. This is one of those, let's just get into the mix, opening lines of a chapter. Now, Phineas is eating a kebab in a gross manner, getting sauce on his bathrobe and everything. He is delighted, thinking that they brought him his harpy, but Percy clarifies, "She is not yours." And then Phineas says, "I see. Well, actually, I'm blind, so I don't see. Have you come to kill me then?" Pretty good. Pretty good. But he says, "If so, good luck completing your quest." But Percy explains that he's come to gamble. Phineas is intrigued, guessing that it's going to be some sort of situation where, information or harpy to the winner. But Percy says that she's out of the deal, and Phineas laughs that Percy doesn't understand her value. But Percy doubles down, saying that she is a person and she is not for sale. And Phineas thinks that Percy's being ridiculous because, one, he should be pro-slavery as a member of the Roman camp since Rome was built on slavery.
No.
Terrible. Nope.
I know they tell you that Camp Jupiter and Camp Half-Blood, like they said that at the end of the last hero, they last exchanged and they last fought in the Civil War. I don't remember what side it implies each camp was on.
Yeah, they didn't even say that it had to be the same thing, because I believe the justification just became when the gods are quarreling, other wars happen. So it could just be sparked by the situation, not that it necessarily has to be thematically relevant.
Right.
But yeah, that would be bad. But no, I mean, this is just a wild take. Not one that is uncommon. There's definitely a lot of things where people are like, well, you used to do this thing, so you should be okay with this. Like, no, it was bad. It was a bad thing. Just because America was founded on terrible stuff doesn't mean we have to keep doing terrible stuff. It's just absurd when people have that sort of take. But also, he thinks that Percy should be okay with this because 2, she's not human, and 3, she's a monster, a wind spirit, and a minion of Jupiter. So just a cornucopia of bad takes from Phineas here. Hazel puts her arm around Ella to comfort her. Frank readies his spear. Percy produces the vials and explains the wager. There are 2 vials, one that kills and one that heals. Choose right, and his blindness will be cured. Phineas wants to feel and smell the vials, but Percy insists that he must agree to the terms first. But even before Percy can get into these terms, he knows Phineas is going to be on board because Phineas, like a fool, says out loud, "Prophecy in sight. I'd be unstoppable. I could own this city. I'd build my palace here surrounded by food trucks. I could capture that harpy myself." So seems very obvious to Percy that his offer is looking quite enticing.
Listen, I hate Phineas as much as the next guy, but at least he's setting for himself achievable goals. It's sort of like, hey, Superman defends the whole universe. Spider-Man defends all of New York. Daredevil defends like 12 blocks. I mean, hey, that's all he can do.
And Phineas will be the king of Portland, Oregon. Reputable city, and that's fine. Nothing against Portland. Ella is not stoked at the notion of Phineas capturing her himself. Phineas lets out a maniacal laugh and then asks for the terms. Percy says that Phineas can choose a vial, but no uncorking or sniffing before making his choice. Phineas says that that's not fair because he's blind, but Percy notes, "You've got this heightened sense of smell. I don't have that, so we're each at our own advantages/disadvantages." Percy does tell Phineas that he can still hold them, and he swears on the river Styx that they look identical visually.
I do love how he's like, "Hey, Hazel, quick question. You're the underworld expert.
Yeah.
With all this stuff about death, swearing on the river Styx, that's still binding? And Hazel's like, yeah, no, dude, you do not want to break an oath on the river Styx.
Yes, that does come up quite soon. I was confused at this point of what was going to go down. Like, what is the trick? What is Percy trying to do here? And I was wondering if it was going to be, I forget the name. What's that dilemma where if you do something and then you introduce door number 3, like your odds drastically improve if you take door number 3?
I believe it's a mathematical question or something. It's because it's based off of chance, probability. If you have 3 doors and you pick one and then the host shows you an empty door and offers you to either stay with the door you picked or switch to the other door, what should you do? And mathematically speaking, you should switch to the other door.
Correct. It is the Monty Hall Problem.
That's what it is.
It is a brain teaser. It's a probability puzzle, and it is initially inspired by Let's Make a Deal, and it's named after his original host, Monty Hall. So yeah, it's one of those things where like you should always take the swap. Basically, it's because you've got a 50-50 shot after, so you should do it. It's better.
Yes, that is how the math works. Yeah. It took me a second. I'm like, wait, no, that is correct. Yes. Mythbusters did a wonderful episode on this problem. If you want to check that out, they'll explain it a lot better than we will.
Right. I'm sure there's oodles and doodles of YouTube videos you can find as well, because not everyone can do what I did when I was first faced with the Monty Hall Problem. I think it came up. Oh yeah. It came up in a stream we did of 20 to Midnight, the D&D stream that I do with some other podcasters, but I was refusing to believe that your odds get better. So I reached out to Kelly's sister and her husband, that iteration of my in-laws, and they're both PhD graduates of math and probability. So I was like, yo, what's up? And then they explained it to me. It was fantastic. So if you don't have people in your family who know a lot about probability, watch that Mythbusters video. But anyway, Percy Jackson. I was wondering if that was going to be the situation. That is not the situation. Percy checks with Hazel, as you mentioned, calling her the underworld expert if swearing on the river Styx still holds water. And she says yes. She says that breaking that kind of oath is worse than dying. So Phineas recaps and tries to clarify what the stakes are. He's going to choose what vial to drink. Percy has to drink the other one, and then they will drink simultaneously. And I didn't realize this was going to be a situation where Percy was also drinking. I thought it was going to be a 50-50 thing of either Phineas dies or Phineas gains sight, and now we have to deal with Super Phineas. But now it's really increased the stakes because it's not just alive Phineas, if he's right, it's also dead Percy.
This is why I chose this chapter, because there are many moments, I think, if you ask any different Percy Jackson fan, what would you say is the quintessential Percy Jackson moment, the character? And people will cite sources and they'll be like, oh, this cool thing he did in the last Olympian, putting the golden fleece on Annabeth in the Sea of Monsters, etc. No, this for me is peak Percy Jackson. He is betting his life in a 50-50 shot just to get more information.
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. And then we will see what led him to the confidence to pull off the move that he does. And I just love what led to it, because it's just such a baller move. And it's really good. It's really powerful. But I'll save it until we get to it, in case there's people who listen to this podcast without reading the books, perhaps, which there's got to be at least one. Tens of thousands of people listen to it. There's got to be at least one.
Listen, sometimes I engage with like the comments in your subreddit or whatever. There are people who are straight up like reading at the same pace as you, who are
like they're following the book. Well, yeah.
There are some people who are really dedicated to that. Much props. If you told me like the live show that you're recording, hey, to give a little quick peek at when we're recording this is the 20th of January. The next live show I think you said is what, 29 and 30?
Yeah, 29 and 30 in Hartford.
I can tell you for a fact there are people who will not read those chapters until like they're at the live show with their copies.
Yeah, there was someone that did that at the Austin show recently, and I was doing the Percy Jackson's Greek Gods spinoff book, and they were reading along with it. And I got super nervous. They were in the front row. I got super nervous because this is just like a textbook narrated by Percy, giving you the backstories of gods and goddesses. I was worried, like, if I got something wrong, they would from the front row be like, no, you messed it up. Because it's less like just recapping the plot and more of like trying to talk about like the facts, because I do more summarization in that, because those chapters are a lot longer. So I was definitely actively like, oh my God, I hope I'm not messing anything up. Because there's someone who can fact check me immediately. But yeah, I'm sure there's also people who listen who just like don't even bother reading the books. They're like, he goes so in detail, I'll just listen to this fun story on a weekly basis. Like, there's got to be at least one person that does that. So let's not spoil it. Anyway, Percy Jackson. So Phineas continues, saying that the loser will die, and this poison would probably prevent him from coming back for a while, as his essence would be scattered and degraded. Phineas muses about how this is a huge risk, but Percy tries to make the alternative, winning, sound enticing, saying that he'd have everything. He'd be able to get revenge, and Gia won't even give him his sight, so how else is he supposed to regain it? And that line seals the deal. He can tell that Phineas resents Gia for not fully helping him and fully giving him back what he would like to have. Phineas then makes a great point. If I die, I can't give you the information, so how's this going to help you? And Percy says that Phineas must write down the location ahead of time. Percy says that he can keep it to himself, but he must swear on the river Styx that it is specific and accurate. And Percy adds that in this swear, Phineas also must swear that him losing frees the harpies from the curse. And now I'm thinking, okay, so Percy's going to do some sort of trick to steal the paper, especially with how fast the red harpy was. I was wondering if he was just going to do like a suck it loser and just have her steal a piece of paper, but it's more elaborate than that.
I would also think that if not for the fact that they've already sworn on the river Styx, they've sworn on the river Styx so much in this like 10 paragraph exchange, it's pretty much locked in. This is what's going to happen if Phineas agrees. You know, that idea of like, if you find a genie and you wish for a wish, they'll monkey paw you.
Yes.
Unless you're really, really specific. Percy, I have now come to the conclusion, would absolutely be the kind of person who sits down for 5 minutes, carefully planning out the exact wording of his wish.
Well, he's been screwed over so many times. There's been multiple times where people are like, oh, you didn't swear on the river Styx. Oh, you didn't clarify this. Oh, you didn't say that. Oh, we didn't do that. Like, there have been so many times where various godly beings have done so I think it makes sense. I'm glad that Hera kept this in the information that he still has within him, because yeah, he's smart to do it. So I'm glad he laid that out. And that was even something that informed my thought process, because at first I was like, oh, can Percy pretend to drink it? But I was like, no. They swore on the river Styx that they would drink it at the same time. So Phineas grumbles, those are high stakes. You face death, Percy Jackson. Wouldn't it be simpler just to hand over the harpy? And Percy says, not an option. He's such an action hero in these 2 chapters. It's great.
Yeah, he says not an option, and then you know, the CSI Miami thing played in the background.
Of course. Phineas grins, Grinius, and says that Percy must now understand her worth. He says that if he wins, he'll just capture her himself, and says that he could become king again. Percy asks, do we have a deal? Phineas is still mulling it over, but tells Percy that if Percy wins, he won't have a bright future ahead. Quote, a big sacrifice is coming, and you won't have the courage to make it. That will cost you dearly. It will cost the world dearly. It might be easier if you just choose the poison. Now, if I'm trying to put on my prediction brain here, this makes me think there's going to be some sort of situation. Maybe this is the oath to keep with a final breath, but there's going to be some sort of situation where somebody's got to die. Percy doesn't want to make the choice, so someone offers themselves to be the sacrifice, and that is the costing dearly. And maybe Percy was contemplating sacrificing himself, but then couldn't bring himself to do it, so someone else did, or Percy has to like potentially take someone out, but then someone else, takes themselves out. I feel like that could be what this prediction is. I have no idea if this is going to be a book 3, 4, or 5 thing, but it was definitely an interesting little tidbit for Phineas the Seer to drop here. Yes, good job. Trapdoor, still intact. Percy wants to think that it's just Phineas trying to get in his head, but he recalls what Juno said to him when he got to Camp Jupiter. Quote, you will feel pain, misery, and loss beyond anything you've ever known, but you might have a chance to save your old friends and family. So, again, pretty tricky, pretty tough. I wonder, like, is Annabeth going? Is Tyson going? Like, I feel like Annabeth and Grover are going to be safe because I do know that they show up in future stuff. But I truly don't know the fate of other people. I don't know what's in store for some of the other characters that we really like. So, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know if Tyson is safe. I don't know if Chiron is safe. I don't know if Thalia is safe, even though she's immortal. I don't know, aside from like our main trio. So it could be tough.
God, I wish Chiron wasn't safe. Somebody throw an arrow at that man.
Come on, he makes the book so interesting. So the harpies gather around in nearby trees to watch. Frank and Hazel look with concern, even though Percy assured them that the odds aren't as rough as a coin flip. He told them he had a plan, and he does. But what he didn't tell them is that his plan could backfire, so his chance of survival is either 100 or 0. I mean, reading this, I was like on the edge of my seat. Like, it was very captivating stuff, written in a very enticing and thriller-esque way. He asks Phineas again if they have a deal. Phineas grins again, Grinnius 2, the sequel, and swears to abide by the terms and asks if Frank and Hazel swear to leave him in peace and not seek revenge if he wins. Frank is furious but swears, as does Hazel. Ella quotes something from some book with swear in it. I'm sure it's from some famous book, but I couldn't care less because I just wanted to get forward and see what happens.
Oh, it's from Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, sure, cool. Shakespeare, whatever, fine. I prefer West Side Story, which Shakespeare completely ripped off. Just a complete rip-off. That's a joke. No one email me. Phineas chuckles and then asks for something to write. Don't do it. Does Mike really think that West Side Story... Phineas chuckles and then asks for something to write with. Frank borrows a pen and a napkin from a nearby food truck vendor, and I laughed out loud at the thought of just mortals being around for this. Like, there's this intense standoff going between an old man, 3 children, and a bunch of, I guess the mist would make them look like either chickens or pigeons. Like, what do these people see? Like, this intense, heated battle in the middle of a parking lot with a bunch of food trucks around. It's such a funny visual. I burst out laughing.
In New York, this would just be an average Tuesday.
Oh, that is Tuesday.
But this is Portland, Oregon. Everyone's
in Portland, not that weird. Honestly, in Portland, this is super duper normal. This is super duper duper normal.
I'm learning so much about Portland. I guess I need to. I guess because like if I do make video essays for every book,
right? I
guess at some point I will be going to Portland, which will be a weird thing to think about. But you know.
Look, it's a good town. You could even do a whole Pacific Northwest thing, especially with this book, because they're going to Seattle, a city that I love so dearly. Love Seattle. But no, Portland's a good town too. Now, Phineas writes on the napkin, he stores it in his bathrobe pocket and swears that it is the location. Percy uncaps a riptide and clears off the food from the picnic table. They each sit on one side of the table. Phineas asks to feel the vials, and Percy looks at the hills in the distance and imagines Gia's face in the shadows. And I just wrote, oh! He thinks towards the ground. Okay, Gia, I'm calling your bluff. You say I'm a valuable pawn. You say you've got plans for me, and you're going to spare me until I make it north. Who's more valuable to you, me or this old man? Because one of us is about to die. Incredibly well written, but also an incredible move, and one that I can respect specifically because I'm not going to give away any spoilers, but there's something that I did towards the end of Baldur's Gate 3 where there was someone, it's a similar sort of like, oh, I've got you as a pawn situation, and I definitely continued to call that person's bluff, and it did help advance me in the game. So Percy doing this, I love it, because this like just happened. This is super recent, where she's like, oh, I've got big plans for you, and he's like, all right, bet. Like, oh, it's so good.
Put your money where your mouth is.
Yes, it's a huge move. It is a risky move. But if she's very recently coming off saying, I've got all these plans and stuff, it's the perfect move to make because he's not committing to being on her side. He's not taking any sort of oath with her, but he's just letting her know, hey, I either will die or you got to save me. So you want to come in and make sure, miss, I've got big plans for you? Like, it's so smart from him. Gosh. And it's also just cool. Like, it's really smart, but it's also badass. Oh, it's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
It's awesome. I was so stoked when he pulled this out. Delicious. Phineas asks for the vials again. Percy hands them over. And while Phineas feels them, Percy feels an earthquake, and the left vial shakes a little bit more than the right vial. Phineas takes it, calls Percy a fool, and I didn't get it at first, but I was like, why is Phineas so smug in this moment? And he then says, let's drink. Percy takes the vial on the right. Phineas offers a toast to the Sons of Neptune, and I was like, the thing! And then they uncork and drink. Percy immediately doubles over, and his throat begins to burn, and his mouth tastes like gasoline. Now, obviously, I know Percy's not going to die, but I was thinking, oh, is he going to get his memories back? Like, I didn't even think about the other side of the equation. If he's right, he gets the healing thing, which is supposed to heal, in theory, him completely. So in theory, he would get his memories back. Wild if Percy fully understands who he is, like 60% of the way through the book. Oh, man.
He's like fighting someone random. He's like, wait a minute, I'm Percy Jackson. I live in New York City. My girlfriend's Annabeth Chase. My best friend's Grover Underwood.
And I hate Dean Martin. He sucks so much. But yeah, that would be wild because Jason found out on like the penultimate page of the book. So if Percy is not even 2/3 of the way through and he knows it, oh, that's such a fun dynamic. Oh, man. Oh, so exciting. So that was what I was thinking in this moment. Hazel and Ella are worried. Phineas is very triumphant. Percy feels like an idiot as the pain feels like broken glass working through his digestive system. Frank grabs Percy's shoulder and says that he can't die. Percy gasps, and then suddenly his vision is clear. So, good. I figured this was going to happen, but still good to have the confirmation. Just as this happens, Phineas doubles over in pain and begins to curse Gia. He says that he's too valuable for this. And then I realize, oh, he thought the earthquake was for him. Oh, like that makes it not tragic because I want this guy to die, but like it makes it even more humiliating for him because he thought like, oh, wow, she's looking out for me. But now he has to realize, oh, this is specifically to kill me. Like, oh, man.
That's actually the better way to look at it. That was a trick. I always looked at it as initially Phineas got it right, but then Gaia was like, oh, you know what? Damn, I'm girl bossing too close to the sun right now. I'm just gonna, quickly whoop while it's processing through their systems, which to me would have been freakier. Imagine.
Oh, you thought it was that? Yeah, no, that's too strong.
Yeah, you know what? If it was like how I imagine it, yeah, that'd be too strong. Because then what's stopping Gaia from at any point being like, okay, I'm just gonna like take out your blood and you're dead.
Yeah, your blood is now Baja Blast. Goodbye. So I think that's what it is. And that's why he's so smug in that moment. That's the only explanation that I can see. So it just makes it extra crushing. But like, this is what happens when you partner with evil villains. You become expendable. Like, watch one movie, Phineas. Come on.
There's something kind of symbolic about how the vial that heals at first feels like very painful, poison, like medicine kind of vibes, and how the vial that kills feels fine at first.
Yeah.
Which I think is mostly kind of how poison seems to go. I'm not an expert in poisoning people, but hey, you're fine for the first X amount of time, and then it's like, oh, dead.
Right, yeah. Based on how it goes in movies, that's kind of how it seems. But yeah, I didn't even think of it with the vials. I thought of more just the reason Percy was retching over and stuff. I thought that was the memory thing, just because when his memories came back a little bit a couple chapters ago in Schist Town, he just like felt awful. He felt like schist. So I thought that was what that was, not necessarily a poison thing. So yeah, I was thinking it was just like maybe the memories are coming back. Oh, but kind of have to see what happens. Then yellow vapor begins to emit from the orifices in Phineas's face, and he screams that this is unfair and that Percy tricked him, and he tries to grab the paper. I was like, oh, you jerk. No way, man. You can't. But thankfully, his hand crumbles away. Percy doesn't feel like his memories have returned, and I was like, oh, damn. But at least the pain has ended, so he doesn't feel like he's going to die, which is like, all right, I'll take it. But also, can the memories come back? But Percy says to Phineas that there was no trickery afoot. Phineas made his choice freely and is now suffering the consequences. And I know that it's not as unfair as the thing that I'm about to compare to, but it does feel a little Squid Gamey when they're like, oh, you all signed the contract and you all agreed to this. Like, okay,
yeah, listen, in Squid Game, it's like, yeah, we're taking advantage of the fact that many of you are desperate financially.
Right.
But you guys signed the contract. You guys want this. And it's like, I mean,
yeah,
they do, but also,
if anything, it feels like the first game of Squid Game season 1, like the first one where they don't know truly the stakes, but I guess they signed some big contract that they didn't read properly. But it did feel a little bit like Percy being like, well, you did agree to Apple's terms and services. Like, come on, man. So then Phineas wails out in agony, turns in a circle. He is steaming, he's disintegrating, and then there's nothing left but his stained bathrobe and his bunny slippers. And Frank then says, quote, "Those are the most disgusting spoils of war ever." Pretty good. Not something you want to loot. But
No.
then Percy hears Gia's voice in his mind. A gamble, Percy Jackson. It continues, and it's very important to note the narrator Percy says that it has a hint of grudging admiration. That's such a fun little note. Grudging admiration. So basically, game, respect, game.
It's like that Will Ferrell line, I'm not even mad, I'm impressed.
Yeah, it's pretty nice. So Gia continues, you forced me to choose, and you are more important to my plans than the old seer, but do not press your luck. When your death comes, didn't like the definitiveness with which she said, when your death comes. When your death comes, I promise it will be much more painful than Gorgon's blood. So then Hazel checks to make sure that Phineas is actually dead. Nothing is underneath the bathrobe, no sign that he's reforming. And then she's just dumbfounded and looks at Percy with shock and calls it either the bravest thing she's ever seen or the stupidest. Frank also is in complete and utter disbelief. He asks Percy how he knew, because Percy was just so confident for something that should just be a 50-50 split. Percy explains that it is Gia. He says that Gia wants him to make it to Alaska, and he says she thinks ... I'm not sure. She thinks she can use me as part of her plan. She influenced Phineas to choose the wrong vial. So again, I think that makes it super duper clear that that's what happened with the vials and the shaking. Frank is just aghast and is surprised that Gia would kill her own servant in place of Percy. And he asks, is that really what you were betting on? And then Ella says, plans and plots. The lady in the ground. Big plans for Percy. Macrobiotic jerky for Ella. And I was like, yes, the macrobiotic jerky. It's come back. It's come back. She's going to eat it. It will be consumed,
It's finally
fulfilling
paid off.
its destiny. Oh, so happy. So happy.
Percy can finally remove this item from his inventory.
That honestly brought me so much joy. So then Percy hands her an entire bag of macrobiotic beef jerky, and she is absolutely delighted, and she is so excited that Phineas is dead and that she can get food. And then Percy crouches over the bathrobe and takes out the note, and it says Hubbard Glacier. Now, I am no Alaska expert, but this feels like a key enough detail of a specific glacier. Truth be told, didn't even know the glaciers got named.
Neither do I. I need to say, this whole thing would have happened. And like, listen, if it actually happened as I'm about to say it, it'd be terrible writing, but it'd be so funny if they're like, opens the note and it's a bunch of scribbles because he's a blind man, doesn't know how to write with pen and paper.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that would be bad if it was just all completely illegible. Yeah, I wonder, gosh. Yeah, there's no like way to get a non-biased third party to adjudicate and make sure that it was legible. Because, I mean, he swore in the river Styx, right? So I don't know if like the powers that be guide his hand.
Hey, I swore on the river Styx. I think I'm writing the word Hubbard Glacier. Here you go.
Right. Maybe it's the power of Hades or whoever is like the lord of the Styx if it's not Hades. Like maybe some sort of deity steered the hand of Phineas to make sure that it wrote it properly. Now, thankfully, Hazel chimes in saying that she knows where it is. She says that it is pretty famous, but it's pretty far as well. So then, in the trees nearby, the harpies are also overcoming their surprise at the situation. They are excited. They fly near the food trucks. They dive through service windows. They start raiding the kitchens. The cooks start shouting out. The trucks are rocking back and forth. There's feathers flying around. There's food boxes flying around. And then Percy ends the chapter with, quote, "We'd better get back to the boat. We're running out of time."
Yeah!
So I retitled this chapter, I Eat Broken Glass, Ella Eats Macrobiotic Beef Jerky.
Oh, that's great. I titled it as a reference to the Doctor Strange movie, Phineas, I've come to gamble.
Oh, I'm so glad you made that reference, because when he said that line, that is exactly what I thought of, just because Kelly's a huge Doctor Strange head, and we especially love the Dormammu, I've come to bargain. So I'm glad that this episode is not without that reference. So thank you for making it. But also thank you for being on this episode of the News Olympian. It's the end of the episode. What a fun time. What a cool pair of chapters. And I'm very excited to continue reading on because, oh boy, we're getting into Seattle, I would assume. But Robert, thank you so much for joining. If people want to find you doing stuff, where can they find you doing stuff?
Thank you for having me. If you want to find me on the internet, I am the Damn Meme page, damn spelled D-A-M, pretty much everywhere. Okay, I have to specify because I deleted the Twitter.
Oh.
No more Twitter. Twitter bad.
Yeah. I basically just like don't use it for anything anymore.
If you want to find me, you can find me on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and now YouTube. At the time this episode is being recorded, I'm finishing up a series called Percy Jackson 1 year later. Mike was a guest. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for asking me. It was super fun to talk about episode 6.
Yeah. So if you want to tune into that, that's up. Hopefully by the time this episode comes out, I will have released more videos about more ideas that I have. But also, if you want to hear me talk in a podcast sphere, I host a podcast with my friend Charlie called The Bits, which is a Steven Universe rewatch and analysis podcast. If you haven't watched the whole show, I maybe kind of don't recommend it because we spoil the big twist of the show in the first episode.
There you go. Thank you for protecting people from the spoilers. Well, Robert, thank you so much for joining. Listeners, thank you so much for listening. And until next time, when I would assume our team is going to my former city that I called home, Seattle, Washington. Until then, I'll see you later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to this episode of The Newest Olympian. This podcast is created, hosted, and produced by me, Mike Schubert. I also run the social media and the website. Our editor is Sherry Guo. The music is by Bettina Campamontes and Brandon Grugel, and the art is by Jessica E. Boyd. If you love the podcast and you just can't get enough, there's a couple of different things you can do. First, you can go to thenewestolympian.com/Patreon. You can join the Patreon, and you can get access to a whole bunch of fun bonus content. You can also follow us on social media. We're at Newest Olympian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There's also a subreddit, reddit.com/r/thenewestolympian. And there's also the TNO Discord, which you get access to by joining any TNO tier on the Patreon. You can learn all about the show at thenewestolympian.com, and you can get some sweet TNO merch at thenewestolympian.com/merch. I've mentioned the Patreon, so let's give a shout out to our producer level patrons: Kelsey Gillespie, The Damn Steam Nuggets, Vicky Garcia, Frida Vikstrom, Megan Moon, Sabrina Balsiger, Polly Burge, Nikki Harris, Tatiana Schmidt, Sandra Rose, Josh Sayer, Josh Wilkie, Abby Ryan, Marco Redhouse, Sam Reeby, Mrs. O'Leary, Milo Kim, Sandkoff, Rika, Ryla Matthews, Sky Mallory, Persasabeth, Aiden Parziani, Grace, Ginger Spursboy, A Cup of Solace, Bradimus Prime, Skylar Sisters, Scott Sheldon, Sophie, Natanya Page, Ann M. Thayer Cohen, Bella, Percy Jackson, Han, Haley Hingelheimer Schmidt, Catherine Sloan, Jessica Phillips, Haley Mary, Jim Jam Koopy, Kit Kat Crumbs, Andrea Not Andrea, Jordan Ray, and Nico's Black Vespa. If you want to support the show in a non-monetary way, just tell someone about the podcast. It really does help a lot, whether that is you reaching out to someone directly who you think might enjoy the podcast. Maybe they're a big Percy Jackson fan. Maybe they've been looking for an excuse to read the books. Or if you post about the show on social media, or you leave us a rating and review on whatever podcasting app you're using. Truly, all of these things help. I really appreciate anyone who has done it in the past, and I also appreciate anyone who will do it in the future. But I'm just so thankful that you tuned into this episode, and I hope you tune into our next episode, which will be on March 10th after a week off, where we'll be joined by the folks from Monster Donut in their home state of Connecticut at that live show to break down chapters 29 and 30 of the Son of Neptune. But until then, I'll see you later. Hey everyone, how's it going? It's me, ASMR Mike. So one of the things that's here in the Shubio is something that you might not think would be in a podcasting studio. And it is a big jug of laundry detergent. Now, the reason that it is here is because when we were buying laundry detergent, they had a sale where if you spent a certain amount on laundry detergent, you got a percentage off, which meant that we had to buy 4 big old tubs of laundry detergent. And we don't have room for 4 big old tubs. So Kelly and I decided, since I was the one responsible for making us do this deal, I have to live with the tub in the Shubio. So I'm just going to like play around with it. It's one of those things where it's like wrapped in a plastic bag and stuff. So I'll like crinkle it around, and that'll be the ASMR Mike segment. One day this will be useful, and the savings were great, but for weeks on end, this tub will live in the Shubio. Thank you so much for listening.